Disclaimer. I am not a statistician or anything like that. What I do might very well be wrong. But I found this question too interesting to not seek out an answer. So let's figure out what Pokemon from Generation 3 is the most average. And so here's what I'll be talking about in this order. Generation 3, Generation 1 to 3, and final thoughts. So let's start with Gen 3 typing. Since the typing isn't exactly a number, it has to be done a bit differently from the other stats. So I'll be starting there, with this, as always, handy dandy chart. This shows that the most common primary type in Generation 3 is Water, with the most common secondary typing being Psychic. Fun fact, there are no such Pokemons in Generation 3. However, that's the average. The combined type that shows up the most is pure normal type. If this chart seems a bit hard to visualize, here's a graph that might help. On the x-axis, it shows the primary type, while the y-axis shows by color coding how common a secondary typing is. So let's move along to the other stats. The stats I have used for this project I have sourced from PokemonDB.net. This website will be linked below. And so here's a list of all the stats that I have included in this project. Total, HP, Attack, Defense, Special Attack, Special Defense, Speed, Primary type, Secondary type, although we've already discussed the typing, Height, Weight, Friendship, Base XP, Growth Rate, Gender Female %, Gender Male %, Genderless %, Egg Cycle, Catch Rate, and the final column is Averageness. This is taking the sum of all of the stats and comparing them to the sum of the average, meaning that if this number is closer to 0, it is closer to the average. Also, the variable purple coloring shows how close the individual stats are to the average. So the more purple, the more average, with the white background ones being far from the average. This makes the most average Pokemon of Generation 3, Masquerain. And so here is an overview of the average, the median, and the mode stats. The median is the middle value when the data is sorted after values. This turns out to be Swallow for Generation 3. The mode means the values that show up the most in each stat. And you can take a look here for yourself what that looks like. So let's talk about the average so far, where I will be discussing the average from Generation 1 through 3. The typing, much like with the Gen 3 stuff, is not numbers. Let's go over that again. First, the most common primary typing is normal, with the most common secondary typing being flying. There is all of 13 of such so far, so I won't be naming them all, like I usually do. Instead, here's a list. However, that's the average. The combined type that shows up the most is a tie between pure water and pure normal type. If the chart seems a bit hard to visualize, here's a graph that might help. On the x-axis, it shows the primary type, while on the y-axis, it shows by color coding how common a secondary typing is. So just like in Gen 3, I'll be using the exact same stats. I'm not gonna go through the list of what those are again. You can also see it on screen now. So far, the average is Wigglytuff. And so here's an overview of the average, the median, and the mode stats. The median is the middle value when the data is sorted by values. This turns out to be Liyun and Spinda. The mode means the value that shows up the most in each stat. You can take a look here for yourself what that looks like. Final thoughts. I am kind of surprised that the so far segment's typing actually had a tie between two different combined typings. That is wild to me. We can now say that Masquerain, if they were a water psychic type, would be the most average Gen 3 Pokemon, and that so far Wigglytuff, as a normal flying type, would be the most average Pokemon. Anyway, bye!